Hello, and welcome to part 2 of the in-CPU deep dive. If you missed part 1, you can catch it in the top right. And if you don't know what I'm talking about at all, I implore you to watch the original video of the in-CPU, in which I explain why I built this thing, and why it even took me all the way to South Korea. And now, without further ado, get settled in with a nice hot beverage, because there's a whole lot of logic to get through today. All right, I'm not going to keep on going with that voice. I just thought I'd do it because, you know what, honestly, I don't know, but I'll keep it in. So yeah, when we left off, we had this right here, where we combined the within 3 rule checker, as well as the state management system for just one player. And now we're just going to take this and then stack it. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4 players, as well as the display up top. So let's get into how these layers actually talk to each other. But the first thing that I want to pull your attention to is the fact that we only have one copy of this part here. This is the within 3 rule enforcer, and we only have multiple copies of these state management systems. This is because we need a separate state management for each player, because they can each be at a different part. However, all of that information then gets aggregated into here. So this thing needs to know 2 different things. Hold on, let me think a second. Okay, no, actually, it only needs to know one thing, and that's if any of these players are on a specific part. And that is done via a simple torch tower. So you can see that each of these outputs from these latches are going into this torch, going into this repeater, which is always being fed into a torch that is on by default. So if this turns off, that means that player 1 is playing this part, right? Which would obviously mean that this torch turns off, and that will propagate all the way up into this lamp here and into this part of the module here. If we go down, however, you'll see that we have the exact same thing over here. And so if either of these turn off, then this torch turns off, and then it propagates all the way up as well. So what we have here is just a simple torch tower, except it's acting as a multi-input OR gate that is just perfectly vertical and one wide. So that already just takes care of the input for this within 3 rule module thingy, but you know, it also has an output, right? And that's these guys right here, which are meant to lock or unlock this comparator. If you recall, this line tells each part whether or not it is available or not. So for the first player, that's pretty easy, right? It's just a regular line of redstone going into a torch, going into a piece of redstone, going into the side of that comparator, exactly like we had over here. But of course, the signal also needs to go down. And so that's what these sticky pistons are doing here. This, by the way, is not technically necessary. This might be leftover from when I was having trouble getting this to update properly. That's also why I have some wacky timings here. This might not be necessary, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So it's basically there to update this piston. Anyways, this piston has a whole bunch of these honey blocks here. That gets extended down. And at the end, we have 2 redstone blocks here. One of them will go into this line, which will then block this comparator here. So this looks exactly the same as the layer above, as you can see here. But of course, it also has a second redstone block here, and that is being passed on to this sticky piston, which does the same thing, going to the lower level here, and then all the way down, back down over to here. This one does not have the bottom redstone block because it doesn't need to keep going. But yeah, basically it's just a repeating pattern like that. Now, as for these note blocks, these ones actually do serve a purpose. This is for quasi-connectivity reasons, and I'll show you a quick example of why this is needed here. So you might be wondering why we can't do something like this, right? So regular line of honey blocks with a redstone block on its face, and that is hovering just 1 block above this sticky piston. So when it gets lowered, it'll occupy this space and then extend, right? So if I put a redstone block up here, there you go. That works exactly as intended. However, a problem arises when I depower this. As you can see... Wait, what? Okay, that wasn't supposed to work, but this is still not a good scenario because if this piston is updated at all, then it'll get stuck as on. If you don't know why this behavior occurs, it's called quasi-connectivity, and I've already made a video on it, which you can catch in the top right. So although this kind of worked temporarily, we want to avoid anything like this because, yeah, that's just side effects waiting to happen. So the safer way to do it is to do it exactly like this. So what happens is this block comes down here into the QC range. It'll also power this note block, which will update this piston here. And when it's removed, the piston will retract. And you can see propagates down and propagates back up just fine. And I can update this piston and it stays retracted like it should. And believe it or not, that is literally it. So we have a vertical up line and a vertical down line, and that's how each of these modules communicate with each other. And now you might be asking, what's all this in the back? Well, basically we're just tapping off the same signal that's being fed into this torch tower, and we're just diverting it over to here, going up and over, and that is going straight into the display. So to keep all the redstone nice and thin, we have our first player going up and over like this. Our second player below it goes around the first player like this, and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, this does mean that the bottom layer has the most lag time, so it has the longest to travel. And also because its signal goes up a torch tower, it also has the longest lag time to actually hear any difference as well as see any difference. But I don't know, it's all asynchronous anyway, so I didn't really think it's too big of a deal. And yeah, that's essentially exactly how it works. So if I start player 1, you can see player 1 is on part 0 here. We'll go ahead and do the same for player 2. There we go, just like that. In fact, let's do the same with player 3. And so now we have all 3 players on part 0 playing at the same time. And you can see that lamp right there represents the fact that one or more players are playing part 0. So let's go ahead and start moving around. Let's say that part 1 or player 1 wants to move forward by 1. There you go. And now you can see that it has moved over, and we see that both of these lamps are on because there are some players here and some players here. Let's go ahead and move player 2 by 3. There we go, it's moved over there, and you can see that that lamp has turned on now. And just to mix it up, let's go ahead and move player 3 by 2. So that should move over to that right there. There you go, and you can see that part 0 has now turned off, and these 3 have turned on. And now that we're here, let's go ahead and test the opt-in system. So if we go ahead and have player 4 opt in to the song, it should join player 1 over here on part 1 because this one is the furthest back active part. Sorry, this is word soup. This is really hard for my brain, I'm not gonna lie. Anyways, let's go down to part 4 here. This is the opt-in button, and hopefully we can see it happen. That one should turn on. There you go. And now it is also playing part 1 alongside player 1. Words are hard for me, guys. And just to demonstrate that player 4 functions the exact same way as everybody else, I'm gonna have it move by 2. So I'm gonna push the button. There you go. And it should move over to here. Eventually, yeah, you can see what I mean by the lag time. Once we get to 7 players, the 7th player has a lot of lag, but you know, the machine still works, so can't complain. Oh, and by the way, we can also show the application of the within 3 rule. So let's go ahead and set that up real quick. All right, so player 2 is on part 0, player 1 is on part 1, and let's say that player 1 wants to move forward by 3. Well, it shouldn't be able to because this one's the furthest back, and we have 1, 2, 3. So this should be the furthest that it should be allowed to move, but let's see what happens when it wants to move all the way to the end. So, moved 3, and you can see that nothing has happened. And you can visually see that because this line is not on. However, of course, if I want to move by 2, there you go. It's allowed, And if I then want to move by 1, it is not allowed. And now I know you were eyeing what's behind me here, so we're finally going to get to it. Don't you worry. Okay, so what you see in front of you is one of the 4 walls of the finished design. So basically I just pasted it in and then removed 3 of the walls. You can also see that I've moved each of the player's inputs into this center ring as opposed to, right, stacked like this. And you can also see that all these black lines like squid tentacles go all the way throughout the thing. This is pretty self-explanatory. It's just redstone wire soup. Oh, but there is something interesting with this. All right, so I've cut this off for demonstration purposes, but let's just simulate a move by 3 on player 7, and let's see exactly what happens here. So that signal strength of 15 is forwarded on this point of the line, and it decays all the way down to this part right here. Now at this point, I could have put a comparator where this redstone dust is, and then just continued a comparator line going all the way down to preserve the signal strength. If I went the comparator chain route, so it would be just comparator, block, redstone dust, block, comparator, all the way down to here, it would add 1 redstone tick per comparator, which would just take a really long time. But of course, since I know that I'm only interested in signal strengths 1 through 3, what I did instead was I put in these repeaters like this. So if we have a signal strength of 3 coming into here, all 3 of these repeaters would be lit up. And if a signal strength of 2 comes in, then only these first 2 will be lit up. And of course, if a signal strength of 1 came in, then only this one would be lit up. That means that a signal strength of 3 coming into here would correspond to a signal strength of 15 on this redstone. A signal strength of 2 would correspond to a signal strength of 14 on this redstone. And a signal strength of 1 over here would correspond to a signal strength of 13 on this redstone. I hope you can follow where I'm going with this. So now a low signal strength is converted back into a high signal strength and then is brought all the way down to here where it's repeated in the exact same way. And then it comes down here where it's repeated in the exact same way again. And then all the way down to here. I cut this off so it didn't do anything weird. But now we will do one more conversion, or actually right here is where I decided that it was the correct signal strength. And that is being fed into player 7's black line right here. So basically with this, I'm able to transmit either a signal strength 1, 2, or 3 all the way this entire distance in a matter of, let's count real quick. Not including the initial delay, we have 1, 2, 3 ticks of delay. 3 ticks of delay to get all the way down here, preserving a signal strength of 1, 2, or 3, which is obviously a lot better than if you were to just do a comparator line, right? So yeah, just wanted to show you that. That took a little longer to explain than I thought, but I hope you got something out of it. But yeah, of course, there's also this song on and off lever. So flicking this will actually turn the song on. Let's actually go ahead and mute that for now. All right, so essentially that line just basically goes along this glass path over here and into this right here, this white wool. From here, it marks this part 0, as you can see, as permanently available. Well, that is until people actually move off of it. That's why this is actually on a latch. So if I pretend that I'm player 1 and I'll just look at the opt-in button here. So if I click that opt-in button, you'll see something interesting happen. There you go. So you'll see that now that a real player is playing part 0, this line turned on, which means this latch turned off. So that signals that this is available to be moved to via this line, and that is for the opt-in system only. And you can see that this on signal is coming up here into here, and this piece of redstone represents it being played. And because there is always going to be a phantom 0th player always playing part 0, this is permanently on. I hope that made some sense. And now if I go ahead and turn off the machine, there you go. You'll see that all of that resets and this block is getting pulled back and part 0 stops playing. If I turn it back on, you'll see that this latch has been activated. And the reason that I had this latch here essentially was just in case I turned it on and then turned it off again. That's why this falling edge monostable is here, to reset this latch here. So I'll go ahead and click that button. There you go. That latch has been reset and everything has turned off. This is the part of the video where my brain kind of turns into soup, so I really hope that I'm able to explain everything clearly. If not, please do leave questions in the comments below. I'm doing my best here, I really am. Oh, also there's one more thing that I forgot to mention. So, you can see that when I turn on the machine, this not only goes this way, right? But the signal also goes up in this direction. And that goes over here into this torch, which goes into this piston. So you might be able to imagine that if this line turns off, then this piston will be extended, sending a pulse into this line and consequently this trapdoor. And in case you didn't know, when this trapdoor closes on this wall here, you can see the texture change, right? All the way down the wall. So this is actually a vertical instant wire. And at every level, we have this observer that is looking at the middle to actually watch for a change, and an observer looking at that observer, and that is going into the reset part of this interesting looking latch right here. Essentially what this does is it ensures that no matter where the players are or how many players are on at the moment, when we turn off the system, like so, there you go, we'll get a pulse, a very quick pulse, and all of these will be reset. So I'm going to do that one more time. So I've turned it back on, and just watch all of these observers. They'll all light up at the exact same time. There you go. And now for these very weird looking latches here. You can see some locked repeater action going on. We'll get to it. We'll get to it. So let's walk through it. So in its off state, the item is in this part of the latch. And when it's on, it'll be in this dropper, and it'll be read by this comparator, which will activate this piston. When it turns on, this piston will push this observer over to here, which will send a 2-tick pulse through here, down here, and into the opt-in line. And when this latch is reset, it will pull this observer back over to here, and that will send a 1-tick pulse into this really long green line, which is being inserted at various points in this orange line here, and that is just a giant reset line. But now for the weird locked repeater madness here. So the reason that this needed to be done was because we have the same button over here for opt-in and opt-out. Actually, this should be labeled opt-in/out. But anyways, we want this button to toggle that latch, but we also need it to be a latch because it's going to be reset by this wall here. So it can't just be a T flip-flop. It needs to be a combination of a T flip-flop and a latch. So of course I started with a regular latch. So that's just 2 droppers facing into each other, and it passes an item back and forth. But we have outputs on either side, and it's symmetrical. So when the item is in this dropper, then it's being read by this comparator, which turns off this torch and unlocks this repeater. And the opposite happens over here. So this repeater is locked. But of course, if this shovel was in this dropper, then this one would be unlocked and this one would be locked. So what this accomplishes is a toggle behavior on this line here. So let's go ahead and show you what that looks like. All right, so the machine is on and my guy is staring at the opt-in button for player 1. So let's go ahead and click it, and you will see that this line here will flash. Boom, there you go. And you see that the locked unlocked repeater swaps. So if I click it again, there you go. You just saw that the signal got passed through this repeater instead of this repeater. So you'll see if I press it over and over, right? Where it will go into is actually swapped. So this is currently acting like a T flip-flop. But of course, we also want the ability to reset it with this trapdoor here. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off the machine, and you'll see, there you go. It resets just fine. So it has the functionality of both an SR latch and a T flip-flop at the same time. I highly doubt I'm the first person to come up with something like this, but hey, maybe you can find a use for it in your own builds. And there is one more thing that the on lever does. So if we follow our way up here, up here, up here into this torch, you can see that it also kicks off this clock. This clock, as you can see, is 4, 8, 12 times 2, so it's 24 ticks long. And that just so happens to be the exact length of 4 beats in our chosen tempo, which is actually 100. So every 24 redstone ticks, you will see that this piston gets fired and it will send a pulse into this synchronization line. So this right here controls the tempo for the entire system to make sure that all the parts stay in sync. So let's get into that right now. I'm just gonna skip part 0 because this one behaves differently than everything else. So let's go to part 1. You can see that this tempo synchronization line thingy passes behind each and every one of these comparators. And at the moment, they're all locked. So most of the time, this pulse won't do anything at all to any of these comparators. But how do we unblock these comparators? So if we just follow this backwards, right, we've got through this block. This block is being powered by a torch that's being powered by this repeater, and that line is being snaked up from here, and that comes from this torch tower here. So in essence, if any player is playing this part, then this redstone dust will turn off. Then when the tempo signal comes through, it will be picked up by this comparator, and it will kick this item into this hopper. And because this is off, this will be on, and so it will stay in this hopper. And then we have a little bit more timing shenanigans happening here, and that goes into this piston. And now it's finally time to explain how this thing makes sound. So this piston will extend. It'll extend all of this downwards, and you can see that there is a little observer on the end there. This accomplishes 2 things. So first, it moves this slime block into position right behind this repeater, and it also, at the end of its motion, sends a pulse into that slime block. And that pulse travels all the way down this line, down here, and back around like this, back into this redstone dust, and then back through the slime block, which is once again behind this repeater. Thus, we have a looping part. And of course, when every single player leaves a certain part, then this redstone line will turn back on, which will turn this torch off, and it will unlock this hopper, which will return its item back into this dropper, right? And it will retract this piston. And because it's been retracted here, and an observer is a transparent block, so it breaks that circuit and the loop will stop. But of course, there's not just this slime block line, there's also a honey line right next to it. What's that doing there? So one of the interesting curveballs that Henry threw at me was that he wanted some way to audibly tell whether or not there are multiple players on a single part. So not only did I have to make physical room for one voicing of a certain part, there are 2 voicings for each and every part. And I had to cram it all into a 3 wide tileable space. And honestly, I can't even believe that I did it. So yeah, you might see that this gold line over here is tuned exactly the same way as this wooden line with the exact same timings. These are the 2 voicings for part 1. So of course, in order for this to move down, right, we need to be able to detect whether or not there are multiple players on a single part. So follow me right over here. So here we are in the absolute torch tower forest that leads up to the display here. So yeah, this is the torch tower for player 1, this is the torch tower for player 2, player 3, and all of these correspond to part 1 here. But of course, how do we count how many of them are on, right? So follow me all the way back here. Here we have a redstone block, which is feeding a signal strength of 15 into the back of this first comparator. And you can see that this here is the torch tower for player 7. And we're grabbing a redstone signal off of this torch right here. So this will be signal strength 15 and then 14. Since this is in subtract mode, it will be 15 minus 14. So now it is passing through a signal strength of 1. Now let's pretend that part 6 is also on. So signal strength of 15, 14, 1 minus 14 is, well, it's negative 13, but it's 0. And so it will actually go from 1 all the way down to 0, and that will be passed all the way onto here. So hopefully it becomes clear that if none of them are on, then we have a signal strength of 15 over here. If exactly one of them is on, then we'll have a signal strength of 1 over here. And if more than one of these are on, then we'll have a signal strength of 0 here. So let's start with none of the players are playing this part. So that means both of these redstone dusts are going to be on just like they are right now. And we are going to have this repeater on and this repeater on. But of course it is not going through this comparator because it is being subtracted here. And so we have this L shape of redstone here. That is basically our OR gate. We're negating that here and then passing that all the way to that piston that we were talking about earlier, right there. And let's say one of them is on. Now you'll see that we have a signal strength of 1 here, but it doesn't go up to here. So we have this coming through here, through there, and we have the exact same result there, where this piston is not being pushed down. However, if I go through and punch out another torch, you will see a signal strength of 0 coming through here. So nothing happens, but finally this torch has turned on. And so this piston has now extended and this gold block is here. Now, of course, in practice, this gold block will never be here without this slime block being here as well. So basically you can assume that this part is already looping, and as it does, right, it will occasionally pulse this piece of redstone right here. And as it does, it will pass on its signal, obviously this way, continuing on with the baseline. But at the exact same timing, it will also send it down this gold line. So what you end up with is 2 voicings of the exact same part perfectly synchronized. So let's go ahead and put this down again. Actually, let's go into free cam and let's actually just watch it happen. So I'm going to place the torch right now. There we go. It reacts pretty fast. And believe it or not, that is literally everything that you need to know about how this thing works. So without further ado, I mean, let's listen to how this thing actually sounds, right? All right, so machine is now on. Player 0, or the phantom player, is playing part 0. So there you go. They don't show up on this display here. Only players 1 through 7 will. Now let's have player 1 opt in. And there you go. You won't hear a change because they're on part 0 right now. Let's have player 2 opt in as well. And why not? Player 3, we'll go ahead and opt them in as well. You'll see them show up right there. There we go. And now player 1 will move by 1. And there you go. It takes a little bit, but you can see that this has moved down. And if you listen closely, it's synchronized. It's synchronized with this one because it was activated using this right here. Yep, you can see the tempo propagate all the way through. It's just really cool. Now, player 2 also wants to move by 1. And you should see, there we go. Yeah, perfectly synced, very nice. Let's have player 2 move by 1 again. So you'll see this one retract and this one extend. There we go. Nicely synchronized. Awesome. Let's have player 3 move by 3. So that should go here. There we go. And you can hear that nicely synchronized. There we go. Let's have player 1 join it. So move by 2. There you go. It started off a little rocky, but it just, it did end up actually synchronizing. Let's have player 2 move by 3. See what that sounds like. So that should be right there. There you go. And you know what? Let's go ahead and have player 1 move by 1. See what that sounds like. There you go. And you know what? Player 4 wants to opt in at this point. So it's gonna join player 3 on this part. There you go. And now we have, you can see, 2 different voicings on that part. Sick. And now it wants to move by 2. Why not? Let's join player 2 over here. There you go. Once again, started out a little weird, but eventually synced up. And you know what? At this point, player 3 wants to opt out. So we'll just get rid of player 3. There you go. Gone. Perfectly fine. Let's have player 4 move by 3. So that'll move over to there. There we go. Nice. This thing makes me unreasonably happy. Move by 3, part 1. Or no, player 1. Let's go this way. Yeah. And... Alright, I think that's enough fun. But you can hear, like, this sounds exactly like in C, doesn't it? This thing is so much fun to play with. Alright, let's go ahead and turn this off. You'll see. There we go. All of them reset. The system is back in its default state. And we are just... I'm so happy with this. This is so good. And that's all there is to it. I say that like I didn't just dump a whole bunch of information on you, but I really hope it was clear enough to be understood, at least a little bit. I really did try my best. So I hope you enjoyed it, hope you learned something, and if you did, please leave a like on this video, and also make sure to subscribe for more cool Redstone content just like this. Hey, by the way, did the subscribe button go all rainbow when I said that? I heard that's a new feature now. Here, check this out. Subscribe. Pretty cool, huh? That means you're legally required to now. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.